The challenges that a lot of people have while learning English, maybe some of the common mistakes as well as things that are difficult. That's what we're going to talk about today. So thank you for joining. And hello, Leon. How are you?
Good, Ben. How's it going, man?
Great. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Hey, everyone, what's up?
Hope you guys are all doing well. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Thank you for joining, everybody. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. And before we begin, please subscribe. Um, all right, so let's get started. What are some difficulties that English learners have that you've come across?
I think that based on the speed of how we natives speak, to them, they consider it as very fast. I don't
Hmm.
think so, but I think it's just a matter of them maybe improving their listening and see how, picking it up. And I think it's more of the speed. A lot of times, a lot of the learners says, natives speak too fast. I can't understand.
Yeah,
I can't keep up. I think that's one of their challenges. Yeah.
I
What
think
do you think? Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the speed at which we speak as natives, it really varies from person to person. Everybody speaks at a different speed, and
Yeah.
I think that as a learner of a language, it's always going to seem too fast for you. But that's not necessarily grounded in reality. In that we might not be speaking too fast. We could be speaking at a normal pace. Like right now, the way I'm speaking, I feel like I'm right in the middle. Like it's a normal pace. It's not too fast, but it's not too slow. I probably would speak a little bit faster, less deliberate if I'm speaking with another native, just having a conversation. But I think that what we need to bring to light is the fact that uh, as a native, if we're speaking to an English learner, you just have to, and this goes for anybody who's a native. Well, you're all native speaker of one language at least. So whenever you're speaking in your native language with anybody who's a learner, you must not speak the same way as you would to another native. You have to naturally, you have to slow down a little bit. I always think it's very rude, like when I am speaking to somebody, let's say for example in Italian, a language that I am learning or have learned, and if they keep speaking in a way that I don't understand, I think they are rude, because it's not about just you speaking your language one way. It's about communication, right? So as a native, we have to adapt the way we speak so that the person we're speaking to, you, an English learner, you have to be able to understand what we're saying. So that means we have to slow down a little bit, maybe change some words around, maybe change the way we pronounce certain things to pronounce words more completely, so that you as a learner can understand better. So I think that there is a responsibility on a native speaker to speak differently when they're speaking to a learner or somebody who doesn't understand them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's very important. Like you said, everybody speaks differently. I mean, for me, I think I speak pretty slow. Of course, you have to adapt, and we natives also have to adapt to who we're speaking with, especially if they are, English learners. But for me, I mean, when I have classes with my English students, I tend to slow down my speech. I mean, it depends on what my level of learners are. If they're starters, I have to speak very slow. But at the same time, I want them to get used to the speed of the English, because a lot of natives really they keep it at that one tone. They don't really pay attention whether you're an
Yeah.
English learner or not. They just
Right.
keep their tone. But also it also depends, because like if you're doing a presentation, you're not going to be speaking fast in a presentation. You're going to take your
Right.
time, maybe slow it down so everybody can take notes. So it really depends on the situation and some circumstances. Yeah.
That's right. As a native, when you're speaking to a learner who maybe isn't fluent, you have to, as a native, speak like you're giving a speech, like you're doing public speaking. So, what does that mean? That means you do have to slow down. When you do public speaking, you cannot speak fast, even if the people you're talking to are all natives, right? So you
Yeah.
just don't. That's just not how you do public speaking. Secondly, when you do public speaking, you have to check the temperature of the room. Make sure you know you're getting a read on people, your audience, making sure that they understand what you're saying, checking out, are people nodding? Are they nodding off? Are they falling asleep? Are they understanding you? So a lot of natives don't speak with language learners like that. They don't check to see if that word you just used, is that something that that person understood, or do you have to parenthetically explain, oh, what does that mean? If I said, oh, that thing that he did was total BS, and then I keep going blah blah blah, and you as a learner, you're thinking, what does BS mean? So I've lost you,
Yes.
right? So you have to parenthetically, which means in parentheses, as an aside, just pause for a second and explain, oh, by the way, BS means bullshit, or by the way, it means nonsense, or something like that. You kind of just take 1 or 2 seconds to explain that word you just used. You have to do that as a native when you're speaking to a language learner. And that's something that a lot of people don't do, because I think that a lot of natives are not self-aware that when they speak, they're speaking not in a way that is where they're catering to the learner. They're just speaking based on their own perspective or for their own purposes. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And a lot of times too, I mean, we natives, like even New Yorkers, I mean, we tend to do like connected speech and like, for example, they may say like, what do you want to do for lunch? I mean, that's pretty fast. What do you want to do for lunch? And a lot of English learners have difficulty understanding that, especially depends on the level, right? So, and
Yeah.
sometimes we eat our words, we mumble our words. So these also plays a factor. Yeah.
And a lot of learners, you guys do this. You do. Ask yourself, do you do this right now? I'm going to tell you. What you guys do, you English learners, you don't tell people to repeat themselves, or you don't tell them to say it in another way. So what I do when I'm talking to an Italian, if they say something I don't understand, I will for sure say, can you repeat? Can you repeat yourself? Or else I've actually even said, okay, please say it simpler. Pretend you're talking to a 5-year-old kid. I've
Mm,
literally said that.
hmm.
And it's like, come on, like, what's wrong with you? I don't. So here's the thing, you have to come from a place of confidence, right? So
Hmm.
I come from a place of confidence. So I'm just kind of like, hey, my Italian isn't that great. That doesn't mean it's going to be bad forever. This is where I'm at right now. And can you can you do me a favor and start talking to me in a way that I'll understand, because communication is a two-way street. So I've actually almost scolded people for speaking in a way. It's like, why the hell are you saying all these idioms that I don't understand? Why don't you speak to me like somebody who's learning the language? Don't speak to me like I'm Italian. So you guys, as an English learner, need to have the confidence and be willing and able to do the same with an English native speaker, to say, hey, hold on a second, hold on. Number one, slow down. Number two, repeat yourself. Number three, talk to me like I am a 6-year-old. And there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you seem stupid. All it does is it makes you seem realistic and confident. And that's what you guys need to do.
Hmm. Exactly.
All right, what else? What else is difficult
I,
for English learners?
I'd say like maybe the slang words or idioms, we natives, we tend to do that. And for them, depends on what their English level is. And sometimes we say a lot of, idioms or slang words, like say, for example, a native speaker might say, not everybody, this is not very common, but it depends on what part of the city or state you're from. Say, for example, it's raining out there, and someone would say, it's raining cats and dogs, or it's pouring cats and dogs out there. And then a native, like say an English learner will look out and thinking that there's actually pets falling from the sky or something like that, but it's not. It just means, it's an idiom. It's like pouring, heavily outside. But they may use it's raining or pouring cats and dogs outside. I mean, these are kind of an example, but things that we tend to use, like a piece of cake, it's not like I want a piece of cake, but it's more something that makes it very easy. So I think a lot of the slangs and a lot of the idioms that we use, especially if you're an English learner, you may have difficulty understanding a lot of the natives because of that. Yeah.
You know, before I learned Italian, I wasn't as aware of the whole language learning process, right? Because as a native speaker, you're not really aware of learning English, just like you're not aware
Hmm.
of learning your native language. But when I started to learn Italian, I became aware of the mechanics of learning a foreign language. And so I also came to realize that, for example, we're talking about idioms. A lot of a lot of us native speakers, we speak idiomatically a lot without even realizing it. And I would say
Hmm.
to you guys, you want to be able to use idioms in a way that you don't even realize you are using idioms. Because the moment you realize you're using idioms, that means that you are using it intentionally. And when you use idioms intentionally, most of the time, it's not going to be used properly. You're not going to use the idiom properly because a lot of times, as a learner of a language, we focus on learning the meaning of the idiom. And while knowing the meaning of an idiom helps you to understand when other people use that idiom, it doesn't, or at least it incompletely helps you to understand, inadequately actually, to help you understand how you can use it properly. So just because you know what the idiom means doesn't mean you're going to use it properly. That
Yeah.
requires yet another stage, another level of understanding that does not come from studying idioms. It doesn't come from, quote, learning idioms. It only comes from encountering them naturally over and over again, and to the point where when you say something and it's an idiomatic expression, you don't even realize you just use an idiom, because a lot of natives will say something. In fact, it's an idiom, but we're not thinking, oh, it's an idiom. There's no other way to say it. This is the only way to say it. It's really funny because it's like we don't really think of it as an idiom, but you guys, learners of English, you're classifying everything we say. You're breaking everything down to parts of speech, all that. And this is an idiom, but we don't even think, oh, we're using an idiom. To us, it's just, how else do you say it? You know what I
Hmm.
mean?
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's because we're natives, we're immersed in the language since childhood, when we're learning the language, and it's like you said, it's just basically natural for us without even thinking about it. And in order for them, English learners out there, it's not really about memorization or understanding. I think is you just have to immerse in it and let it come natural to you to really deep, uh, think about deeply about these idioms,
Yeah.
and understand them and not just memorization, because sometimes you may misuse it like you mentioned, Ben. I mean, sometimes they think that they can use it, but then when they use it, it sounds so awkward, right? It
Awkward.
doesn't
Yes.
sound natural. Yeah.
Yes. Let me give you an example. I heard a guy, and this happens a lot with people who learn English as opposed to absorbing English in a natural way. This happens a lot with English teachers who themselves aren't that good in English. So he was saying something, 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 and he said, let me give you a shining example. So that's completely wrong. What is a
Mm,
shining example? Let me give you the definition. The definition of this idiom, a shining example, is like when, or it's an expression, but when you say something is a shining example, that means it's a great example. It's very it really shows or demonstrates what that thing is. It's a good example, in other words. So what he's trying to say is, let me give you a good example. But instead of saying that, he says, let me give you a shining example. However, what you don't realize is that you don't say, I'm going to give you a shining example. I however, can say, oh, he gave a great shining example. It's almost like I'm editorializing. I'm sort of critiquing the example you gave, and say, and I can say, oh, it was a shining example what he just gave. But you cannot say that of yourself. So this is the subtlety that a lot of learners don't pick up. And so they will just think, oh, it's a shining example means it's a very good example, so let me just use it this way. But it's totally wrong. Now, nobody's going to not understand what you're saying. Nobody's going to stop you and correct you. But these are the kind of things where no matter, okay, listen, no matter your accent, okay, people will know immediately. If that's your goal, people will know immediately you're not native when you make those kinds of mistakes. So so just understand that to learn idioms and use them properly, you've got to do a lot of listening. You have to listen to a lot of educated native speakers to understand how they should be used, because there's a mood, there's an intent, there's context. there's a certain weight to the idiom, to the word, to the expression that is appropriate and when it's not appropriate. And you won't be able to learn that. I promise you, you won't be able to learn it. You can only sort of be you can only instinctively understand how it should be used. That is the only way, because that is the at that point that is English as an art, not English as a science.
Hmm.
Okay, so what else other than idioms?
I would say like regional accents, you know, like if you're from certain parts, I mean, not everybody are going to sound the same, right? Because they're
Yes,
different parts
yes.
of dialects and different part of the, you know, coast regions and things like that. So, for example, if you're from Boston, when you say park, you're not going to say park, you're going to say paw, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
even even in the South, right? I mean, people will say howdy, howdy y'all, or howdy partner. I mean, that tends to
Mm-hmm.
be more country like, more in the
Yes.
South. Or if you're listening to country music, that's how people talk. But with us, you know, metropolitan cities like LA, New York, Chicago, we're not going to be saying howdy, howdy y'all, howdy partner. No, that
Right.
tends to be more of the South. So it really depends understanding the regional accents. And a lot of maybe English learners don't understand that because what they see in Hollywood, they expect that this is how Americans talk. But then when country people or people from Texas start speaking, they say, "Oh my gosh, I have difficulty understanding people from Texas because of, you know, their accents and how they talk, right? Or even from the South, like Mississippi or Alabama, right?"
Yes, yes. I think
Mhm.
as an English learner, you might have difficulty for sure with some of the heavier regional accents, like like you said, like the Texan accent. How y'all doing? How y'all,
Mhm.
howdy, or yeah, yeah, because they kind of tend to create have their own words as well that you're as a learner you're not familiar with, because you're learning just sort of standard written English, and you add to it that people use colloquial English, which is already different. That's already going to throw you for a loop, which means that's already going to confuse you. And on top of that, then you have this strange quote strange accent that you're not familiar with, and so yeah, it's going to be hard. And hopefully, the Texan, the Southerner, the New Yorker you're speaking with, they're willing to sort of be flexible and adapt the way they speak to your level of understanding.
Yeah. And I love how Boston, you know, with the Boston accent and New York accent, I mean, the way they say car, they say call. For me, I kind of like these
Yes.
type of
Yes.
accents. It's pretty
Yeah.
interesting, right? So,
I
and
like
we're
them.
natives. Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, accents are difficult. But the thing is that here's the thing. If you're an English learner, you might not even be able to, not you might not. You most likely won't even be able to tell that it's not a standard accent. You're just not able to understand it. You don't know why. You don't know
Mhm.
if you don't know that it's because of their accent, that it's regional. You just simply have never heard that word. That's what it's going to sound like to you. Something you've never heard, as opposed to, oh, that's a different accent, and that's why I don't know what he just said. No, that's not why. You just are not going to be able to understand anything of what that person said, as opposed to being able to actually decipher that it's the result of an accent.
Mhm. Yeah. And I
Um,
say another thing that another
mhm.
thing is like a lot of natives, they tend to mumble, right? They're
Oh
mumbling or
yes,
even like eat
yes,
their words, and
yeah.
sometimes they hardly open their mouths, and you
It's
left them,
funny.
you know, wondering what are they saying. Like my best friend, he's always mumbling, and I'm like, say what? And I'm a native, and he's a native, but when he's
Yes.
talking, he's like mumbling, and I'm like, wait, what did you say? Or even, you know, go to Shaquille O'Neal, right? Shaquille
Yeah.
O'Neal or Shaq. You
Uh,
listen to him on TNT and the sports, and sometimes you're just like, well, what did you say? What is he saying? It's very difficult. I mean, I'm guilty of sometimes maybe I might mumble something or I might eat my words. I tend to do that a lot. I eat my words. So this is also another thing that makes it harder for English learners to understand. Yeah.
yes. The thing about the mumbling is that it is not limited to just like native speakers doing this. English learners that I've spoken to, some of them, I mean, it is just people in general. It's just how you speak. Some people mumble, and it's
Yeah.
really bad when you're a language learner speaking a foreign language and you're mumbling, because for sure people aren't going to be able to understand you. I've actually had to say to people, "Can you like open your mouth and move your mouth more?" You know what I?
Yeah.
Because I feel like you're
Right.
not. It's like your mouth is locked and you can't
Hmm.
open it all the way. And so, that's mumbling. And so I've actually told people, can you just please move your mouth more and say the word completely? Because yeah, so you just have to understand that you have to be willing to speak the language. When you're learning a language and speaking the language, speak it. Don't like be like, "Oh, well, I'm not really sure if I
Yeah.
want it." Like, okay, come on. You know what I mean? You have to be
Yeah.
brave enough to actually say the word. And saying it really fast or mumbling it, that's not going. And I know why people do that, because they're thinking, if I say it fast enough, then maybe somebody won't catch the mistake. But in fact, not only will they catch the mistake, but they also might catch a different word entirely, or not even understand you. So it just makes things worse. So if you don't know how to say something, I would rather you just ask, how do I say this? I think it's like this, but is that the way to say it? Rather than just mumbling it, and then that's
Hmm.
annoying for everybody, because I actually hate mumblers.
Mm. Yeah, and sometimes you can just tell them and say, "Wait, are you casting a spell on me or something or what?" Yeah.
That's funny. That's funny. A
Yeah.
spell.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So mumbling, it's a bad habit. It's a bad habit, and
Hmm.
it speaks to poor speaking skills. Poor speaking
Hmm.
skills. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. What's the next difficulty?
I'd say connected speech, as I mentioned earlier. I mean, sometimes English learners have difficulty instead of like say, for example, did you eat? Sometimes we just say, "Do you eat?" Right? Or how are you? How you? Yeah.
Uh
So
huh.
sometimes we have these connected speech, and English learners find it very hard, and they say, "Wow, Americans speak fast or the natives speak fast," but that's because of the connected speech that we do. Like, "Do you eat?" It's not like, did you eat? We don't say word for word. We just, do a connection like, did you eat? So it's like they have difficulty understanding that. And that's why they say, we speak fast, right? What you been up to, right? Instead of, what have you been up to? You say, what you been up to, right? So, yeah.
Yes, that's right. I think that as you hear more native English and as your English improves, you're going to start connecting words as well, so that it all becomes sort of one word. A sentence sort of becomes one blended word, as opposed to the but. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And so,
Hmm.
and now that's something that a an English learner should aim for. That's something you should aim to be, to speak, connect by connecting words. As a native speaker speaking to a learner, our goal should be to disconnect a little bit, so that you guys are able to understand better. I think it definitely helps you understand us if we disconnect. However, it's better for you guys to learn how to connect. So let's like just give an example. Let's have a sentence. Like you said, did you eat? If I'm talking to you, a learner, I'm not going to say eat, because you're gonna, huh?
Yeah.
I would just go ahead and disconnect the G to did you eat? I'd be more deliberate. I would pronounce every word, because that's going to help you out. It's
Hmm.
about it's just about facilitating communication. It's about us as natives being flexible and adaptable to the ear that we're speaking to.
Yeah. And I would also say too, like, you kind of get used to it, like what Ben said. I mean, it just works out naturally for you. Like, for example, if you tend to say worked it, you're not going to say it worked it like individually. You're just going to say worked it, right? So you just kind of contract it. Every time there's an it, you just kind of connect that with the it. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Hmm.
All right, give us the next one.
I mean, this is very common to native speakers, like when they use every time they would, you know, pause a sentence, they would also fill that in and say or You see that a lot with the athletes, right? You see them when they're uh in a platform or podium and they're making interview or speech or something like that. A lot of the athletes, they would say and when you start counting it, they're reaching 20 times or 15 times, so
Yeah,
it's very common for natives to do that. Yeah.
a lot of people, a lot of people have those. They use filler words like
Hmm.
and I think that that's a good sign that you need to slow down. I think that natives do that because we want to say whatever we want to say. However, our brain is working slower than our mouth, and so that's why we fill it in. We add in these uhs and ums until our brain catches up to give us the word that we want to say, or whatever messaging it is that we want to get across. However, for you guys as English learners, you say perhaps because you're still trying to you're still trying to figure out what word to use. There's a vocabulary deficiency perhaps, or maybe it's a memory thing. You just I don't remember the word, so hold on a second. Okay, so that's why you do that. But it's also because maybe you're trying to speak faster than you're able right now. And so it would be helpful if you just slowed yourself down. I don't think it's a bad thing to slow down. I just think as a general rule, if you think you're speaking slow, you're speaking at the right pace. If you think you're speaking too fast, if you think you're speaking fast, you're already way, way, way too fast. So I think you need to aim to speak slow so that ultimately what ends up happening is that you sound normal, right?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm guilty for of doing that some of the times or most of the time too, because sometimes my mouth is just starts talking before my brain can catch up to it. So, just my mouth has its own brain of its own. So, sometimes you just got to slow it down, uh, think about what you want to say, especially if you're doing a presentation, right? When you're doing presentation, it'd be terrible every time you're doing it and you're saying, yeah, it's better to just pause, think, and before you say anything. Yeah.
Right. So everybody can benefit from speaking slower and trying to use less uhs and ums. And that comes from speaking slower, like I'm doing right now. I'm speaking a little bit slower. I don't know how I actually sound to you guys, but to me, I know that I'm speaking slower. I can tell that the way I'm speaking now is actually much slower than, let's say, normal for me. But I think that this is a good pace because I think that it helps you guys understand every word I'm saying. And plus, by speaking at this pace, I'm less likely to have to use filler words, which once in a while is okay. But after a while, when you use too many, it's just distracting.
Hmm. Yeah, it's like when we overly use like, right? So like,
Yeah,
hey,
same
what
thing.
do you think? So they're always using like. That's pretty very native like for us to do that. You see a
Yes.
lot of Americans say that. Yeah.
Okay, so this is interesting because you're right in that a lot of natives will use filler words like. Okay, once again, filler words are not ideal. It's not the kind of English speaking you should be aiming for. But
Hmm.
what I've noticed is that a lot of English learners who are, they're pretty good, and I feel like they think they think that to be more native like, they should use filler words like.
Yes.
That, however, is not true. You're just picking up a bad native habit. So see if you can try to resist. Try to resist picking up bad native habits. I mean, I suppose, yes, it does make you more, quote, native like, but it makes you a bad native like speaker as opposed to a good native like speaker.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think part of that is because a lot of the English learners they want to sound native. So in order by putting those fillers, like and also they want to sound more native. And I've listened to one of this English teacher, and she's from another country, like one of the probably Caribbean country, and she was using a lot of like, and more the West Coast, and she says she likes it, but it seems like she enjoys it, and she probably wants to sound more American than in her own country. So that's also another thing too, because they want to yeah, and I guess they want to have that culture, the American culture, or maybe because she's an English teacher and she wants to bring in more business and let her know that she's like a native, but which she's not. Yeah.
Exactly. So even amongst natives, we have a bad habit of using filler words and us, like, and for natives who have actually been through public speaking training, will know that that's not a good thing. And when you're doing public speaking training, people will literally count the number of times you use the word like, which is a
Yes.
bad thing. And so you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so what is the next thing on our list?
I would say sarcasm. I mean, a lot of us Americans, we tend to put in some sarcasm there. It's just part of our nature. Like, for example, if a native would say, "Oh, great, it's raining again," but a learner might think, "Oh, he loves the rain," but he's actually, being sarcastic. So, I think this is part of our culture. I mean, especially a lot of Americans, they'll say something sarcastic, and you just have to pay attention. You got to know when he's being sarcastic and when he's not. Yeah.
Right. And so what is sarcasm? Sarcasm is when you say something, but you actually mean the opposite of it.
Hmm.
Let's give people an example of a sarcastic statement.
Yeah, like the one I mentioned, like, oh great, it's raining outside again, or it's a rainy day,
Yeah.
or I can't
Okay.
believe it. Yeah.
Um, Basically, if you say something in a sarcastic way, you just don't really mean it, like you said about the rain,
Hmm.
about raining.
Hmm. Like, oh
Yeah.
wow, I love this rain, or I love this taco, but it's a Taco Bell and you're not, you want authentic taco. So wow, I really love this taco. But
Yeah.
you're really being sarcastic. Yeah.
Yeah. Or saying that, oh yeah, yes, gourmet tacos. Here you go
Yeah,
from this fast food
exactly.
place. Yeah, that's being
Yeah.
sarcastic.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else? What else on the
I'd say
list?
like unfinished sentences. A lot of native speakers, we often leave sentences like hanging, like I mean, uh, you know what I mean, you know what I said, you know what I'm talking about. It's like they leave this unfinished sentences, kind of a question mark. Um, that happens with us Americans, and sometimes when we say this, it's like a question, and English learners may think, "Wait, are you asking me a question?" Yeah.
Yeah. The I mean is a good example in and of itself because yeah, I have found myself doing this where I'll say something.
Hmm.
Let me see how I can illustrate this. If I'm sort of frustrated with something, I might just I'll say it and then I'll be like, and I mean, like I'll just stop right there. Like I mean, and you sort of just stop right there. Like you said, it's the sentence is incomplete because you're just sort of like, oh my God. I mean, I don't even know what to say. So it's almost like you're cutting yourself off, So you'll say, I
Hmm.
mean, you know, like you'll say, and then you'll stop. Would that be a good example?
Yes. Uh-huh. Or
Yeah.
yeah, you would say something and you say, you know what I mean? Like it's like getting a confirmation or something like that. Your
Hmm.
assurance, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So sometimes we do that. Okay. What else?
What about like pronunciation of the T, right? It sounds it's a
Oh,
silent
this is
T. I mean,
always
we're
difficult.
more
Yes.
on the West Coast, right? Unlike maybe the Midwest and the East Coast, they pronounce the T. Like for example, butter, right? We
Hmm.
don't say butter, we say butter, right? Or
Yeah.
to say mountain, we don't say mountain, we say mountain, right? So
Oh,
it's kind of a silent T on the West Coast. But then again, some people in the Pacific Northwest, they do pronounce the T. So just depends on what part of the region you're from. But yeah, I mean, we Americans, we tend to have that silent T, yeah, when we're
yeah.
pronouncing it.
I think for the most part, when in doubt, don't pronounce the T. With certain words, you're not going to not pronounce the T if it's the beginning of the word. But we're talking like in the middle, like butter instead of butter. You don't say butter.
Hmm.
We don't say
Hmm.
water. You don't say water. You say
Yeah,
water. But
yeah.
a lot of English learners, and this is common difficulty, they can't pronounce the so they say butter. I think that's why they pronounce the T because they can't do the sounds, right? So, but
Yes.
you got to, yeah. So there's butter, water. They can't do the so they can't do water. Um, but I remember years ago having a discussion with somebody who was saying, okay, so I know this guy. His name is Hunter. How would you pronounce that? Okay, so tell me, how would you pronounce that, Leon?
Hunter, yeah.
Hunter. Okay. So,
Hmm.
and so she said, so would you pronounce it Hunter or Hunter? And so I said, I would pronounce it Hunter.
Mm.
But you can pronounce it both ways. You can do it
Yes.
both ways. I would pronounce it Hunter, and like you pronounce it hunter, and that's perfectly fine. Um, and it's very tricky too, because like, for example, if you say winter, right? How would you
Hmm.
say? Would you say winter or winter?
Winner, winner. Yeah.
Okay, so I would say
Winter is good. Well, they're both correct. Yeah, but I'd say winner. Yeah.
okay. I would say both. I don't know actually how I would say it, but I know that I've said it both ways, winter in the winter.
Yes,
Probably
me too. Yeah.
maybe more with the T sound. However, if you're going to use it as a verb, I would think that it's a crime to say I'm gonna winter in Florida. I would think that's a crime to say it that way.
Yeah.
I don't. I
Right.
would much prefer to hear somebody say I winter in Florida as opposed to I winter in Florida. No, no,
Yeah.
please don't do that.
Right. Yeah.
So see,
Yeah,
it
and it's
just
just
really depends.
huh?
It
Yeah, and
just
it's really
depends.
funny. Yeah, and it's really funny. A lot of the East Coast, I mean, sometimes they look at us, they know automatically we're from the West Coast or,
Yeah.
from California. Oh, you don't pronounce your T or something like that. Sometimes they even laugh at us and joke with us. But to us, it's not a problem. And we joke with them too. Why are you pronouncing the T? You sound more British, water, instead of water,
Yes.
right? So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yes. Exactly. But sometimes we'll pronounce certain sounds that typically aren't pronounced as a way of being sarcastic, as a way of of creating emphasis, right?
Hmm.
So I might say, "Can you please do it?" Which is a very different way of communicating the same thing by saying, "Can you please do it? Can you please do it?"
Hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
By pronouncing the it. This is what happens when I say, "Can you please do it?" That
Mm.
sounds like I'm angry, I'm impatient, and now come on, let's go. Versus, "Can you please do it?" It's just a simple request, right?
Yeah, that's a great example because when you're upset, you pronounce the T more than you would in on a
Yes, for sure.
regular
Yes, always.
conversation,
Yes,
Even
yes,
anything that you would pronounce, you would put a heavy stress on it because you're angry. Yeah.
yes, exactly. And it's beyond the T. It could be other letters, other sounds as
Yes.
well. Yeah.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I find that amusing. Yeah.
Yes. All right. Let's continue. What else have we got?
I'd say phrasal verbs, right? Because a lot of
Mhm.
us Americans, we use a lot of phrasal verbs, and that's the problem and the challenge of a lot of English learners because phrasal verbs, I mean, sometimes they may not make sense to them for some reason, but we
Mhm.
use that a lot, and they just don't understand. Like I'm going to pick up my friend later. It's like,
Yeah.
wait,
Yeah.
if it's an English learner or starter, wait, what are you gonna do? You're gonna physically lift your friend off the ground or something like that? You're gonna pick up your friend later? So yeah, I
Yes.
mean
Yeah.
these are the things that we just are very common for us. Again, going back to how we speak naturally. Yeah, we don't even realize that we're speaking phrasal verb. We're just talking, right? Yeah.
Yep. You know what's also interesting is okay, yes, like you said, we don't realize it's a phrasal verb. We don't care, we don't realize it, don't even bring
Hmm.
it up to us. Do you know that the first I didn't even know what a phrasal verb was until I had encountered some English learners on Clubhouse and they were asking me, is this phrasal verb? I'm like, what the hell's a phrasal verb? I would say that you can
Yeah.
ask most native speakers, they're not going to know what the hell you're talking about. Phrasal
Hmm.
verb. Do you know what I mean? Okay.
Hmm.
The other thing is that well, now that I know what a phrasal verb is, I've heard British speakers speak, and they will use different phrasal verbs sometimes than us. And I wish I could think of an example, but they have different ones. So yeah. So like they might say, "I'll draw up a bath." I'll draw up a bath, whereas an
Hmm.
American would say, "I'll draw a bath," right? Which means to fill a
Hmm.
tub, get it ready. But they'll say,
Hmm.
"I'll draw up a bath." So whereas we don't even there's no phrasal verb for that. So with British and English and American English, it's also different as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and we use a lot of phrasal verbs. And phrasal verbs, I mean, that's huge. I don't even know how many there are in phrasal verbs. I mean, for us, we don't count, but I mean, the English learners, they probably know how many phrasal verbs are there. And I would say it's over 1,000. I mean, using a lot of phrasal verbs. Yeah,
I
it's
think so.
definitely hundreds and hundreds. Yeah.
And like for like an example, break down, right? So
Hmm.
here's where I think it can be difficult for English learners because if you just say the word break, if you're saying the car, wait, well, it means to stop working, break down, right? So if you're
Hmm.
the car, well, first of all, you wouldn't say the car brake or the car
Hmm.
breaks or the car is
Hmm.
broken. because by
Hmm.
saying it without the word down, without the word down, if you just use the word break or broken or whatever,
Hmm.
the car breaks, the car broke. It sounds like the car like literally just split in half, or do you
Hmm.
know what I mean? Like a glass broke, and that doesn't make sense. If you want to say that it's not functioning, you have to say it broke down. You
Yeah.
have to have the word down, because what you want to say, let's just put it let me explain it this way. To express what you want to say, you have to use two words. Maybe that's the easiest way to think of it. Even if you were to take it out of the grammar realm, let's just forget that about the whole grammatical aspect of it, and that it's a phrasal verb, whatever. Let's just say, if you want to say something is non-functioning, it doesn't work, you have to use two words to say it. You can't say it you can't use one word, and those two words are breakdown. That's it. Don't try to separate it, break it down. Don't try to separate it into the word break and down and try to understand why is it break and why is it down. What does up and down have to do with it? Just understand that it means, it's just, you have to use those two words to mean non-functioning. I don't know how else to describe it.
Mm. Yeah, it's also like break up, right? We broke up, boyfriend or girlfriend, right?
Yeah,
Or
right.
split up, right? I mean,
Yeah.
to us, it's just a natural thing. Yeah.
Which is again very confusing if you try to understand
Hmm.
every single word, because you're like, what does up or down have to do with breakup or split up,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And it doesn't
Yeah.
make sense. But you just have to just forget about not making sense, and understanding that for the meaning that you're desiring, it requires two words other than one.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, what's next?
I would say I think the hardest part with a lot of the English learners are the humor and the jokes that we have as natives,
Mm-hmm.
right? I mean, we
Yeah,
would play
that's
things with
true.
the word plays or the puns, and we get a laugh at it, and everybody starts to laugh, and they just kind of start laughing, but they don't understand, what's going on, right? So, but I think this is the hardest challenge that a lot of natives, or not natives, the English learners have problems with, because you got to understand the culture, right? Because if you don't
Yeah,
understand the
yeah,
culture,
yeah.
you really don't understand the joke and the humor behind it. So, like if say, for example, if you're at work and someone says, you really nailed that presentation, no pun intended, it's like, wait, why is no pun intended? Because of the nailing, right? You nail. So it's like, what does it have to do with it? So, things like that, right? So, um, it's more of the success, nailed it, like, it's not like using a nail itself. So, but yeah, that kind of thing. Yeah.
And there's no way really to teach humor. It's just a matter of you're going to have to absorb a lot of American culture, listen to a lot of native English, observe a lot of native speakers, uh, immerse yourself with around other native speakers. There's no shortcut, is what I'm saying when it comes to
Hmm.
humor. And I think this goes for any language, anybody learning a different language of which you're not a part of that culture, right? There's no
Hmm.
shortcut. It's
Yeah.
gonna be tough, because look, I've spoken to people who are really good at, like, they're legit good English speakers, but being a good English speaker doesn't make you a good let's say native, right? Because you're not.
Hmm.
Again, you're just speaking the language, which also, if you think about it, a robot can be trained to speak a language. So if you don't understand the culture, you become a very good robot. You
Hmm.
become a very good English speaking robot, but you have no idea about the humor, the culture, and all of that. So this guy that I spoke with, he's very good, and he said he lived in the U.S. for a few years. He worked in the U.S. for multinational corporation. Obviously, his English is good, right? Otherwise,
Hmm.
wouldn't have been able to he wouldn't have been able to grow his career.
Hmm.
However, he said that he always felt in social settings like a little bit of an outsider, because he never quite understood some of the humor that Americans had. And this is no fault of his, it's just that you're not American. You have not
Yeah.
lived in the US for very long. Of course, you're not
Hmm.
going to understand some of the humor. Maybe in the beginning, you won't understand most of the humor. Unfortunately, that's going to happen. And it's just, there's no easy way. There's no easy way around it. There's no shortcut. There's no
Hmm.
right? There's no magic pill to take. You're just going to
Hmm.
have to go through the pains of time, years, and lots of situations where you don't know what the hell's going on, and people are going to have to explain it to you. That's it. That's the only way you're going to ultimately grasp humor, and this is going to be for anybody learning a different language or living in a different culture.
Yeah, other than that, there's no way you're going to be able to learn it based on what you said. I mean,
You can't.
culture is the easiest way to get a head start or to even start, because once you start understanding the culture, then you can
Hmm.
start understanding the jokes and what we're talking about. So, yeah, I mean, some people say, I've been living in the U.S. for 10 years or 15 years, but yet they still don't understand, or they have difficulty understanding the jokes. Because why? They only learned the language. They really didn't immerse themselves in the culture. So they have difficulty understanding or dissecting that joke. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Um, and I think that once you are able to understand American humor, then you've got it. You're there. And
Hmm.
I say that uh, in in all honesty, because I think that I would think of you as somebody who you've reached it. You're there. You've achieved your goal when you understand American humor, as opposed to
Yes.
you have the quote perfect American accent. I think that doesn't communicate to me that you're native. What communicates to me that you're native, more native like, is when you understand the humor and the culture. And yet people wrongly focus on, let me just get the accent, let me get the accent. But that's not enough. That is not enough. And
Hmm.
for what you think an American accent will do for you, I would say that understanding the culture and the humor will do more of that than the accent.
Hmm. Precisely. I think in order for you to really test yourself and how good you are, you got to understand the humor. I mean, I know some people who are C1 or C2 and native like, and they really speak well, but when you throw them in a comedy, show or something, and you're going to watch a comedy event, they don't get it. They completely don't get it. It's because they never immersed or never studied about the culture. They only studied about the language, and that's how important culture is with, learning the language. Yeah.
Well, I also think that the type of person who is concerned with or obsessed with those different levels, like C, A, B, whatever,
Hmm.
all those different levels, is somebody who maybe takes a more academic approach to learning the language.
Yes.
Because in
Hmm.
reality, who cares? Who really
Yeah.
cares? You know,
Hmm.
it's not what your certificate says. It's, can you go to a party and speak to anybody about anything and make friends? Your C level certificate is not going to help you do that. So
Yeah.
I think that we should just understand that for certain times and purposes in our life, we need English tests to categorize where we're at. But in real life, nobody cares. And if you
Yeah.
care, you are going to sort of be the outsider forever in the culture of the target language, because you're going about it I think the wrong way when you're overly focused on accreditations.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I think a lot of these certifications of their language levels and stuff, I think is a scam. Because a lot of times if they get a certificate and say I'm a C1 or C2, but when they talk to you and us being both natives, automatically you say, no, I think you're like a B1. Uh, but they issue this because it's all about, making the profit for schools and et cetera, making them want to continue classes with, their school and academy because they want that
Sure.
certificate, right? But
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
then they're C2, and then when they go to US and travel and they say, oh my gosh, I'm not a C2 level, they realize that they're not even in a high level because they can't even understand a lot of the natives or communicate with them in a high level. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think that sometimes those tests just puts you in this sort of mindset of, I need to be good in English, like academic English, or you know book book English. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
As
Hmm.
opposed to real life English. I think more importantly, we should focus on being good in
Hmm.
English in real life, as opposed to in the context of academia, which we are not in for most of our lives. Keep in mind that we're only in school and we're in academia for a certain period of time. And throughout our entire life, uh, academia is really only a part of our life for a very short amount of time. So
Hmm.
understand that ultimately, at the end of the day, how your English functions and how good you are in real life is way more important than that, again, attaining that certificate. You must look at attaining that certification or whatever it is you need to do as this is just situational. You got to get through it. You got to achieve what you need to achieve. And then you got to just be like, okay, forget it. Now, how do we really speak English? That's how you have to
Yeah.
look at it. It's two different things.
Hmm. Yeah, the most important part, are you able to communicate? And yeah, that's the bottom line. Are you able to communicate? Yeah, and be understood. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Hmm.
All right. So, well, let's end here. This
Hmm.
was a very good conversation. I hope you guys found it helpful. Please give this video a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. Final comments, Leon, before we end?
No, I think we pretty much covered it. To me, my recommendations for the English learners out there is to really immerse yourself in the English language, listen, a lot of listening. And I think the most important is to understand the culture. It's not just the language, it's like what Ben said. You don't want to sound like academic, like kind of a robotic type thing in your language. You're just learning the language. Well, you got to get yourself immersed in the culture too to really understand, because the real test is that humor and the jokes. Once you get that, then you can consider yourself, yeah, I'm pretty much like a C1 or C2 level. If you don't get the jokes and the humor, I don't see how you can be a C1 or C2 level. That's my opinion.
That's right. So, well, good luck, guys, and focus on learning English naturally. And come to come to our channel, watch our videos. We have lots of content that will help you learn English in a natural way. All right.
Hmm.
See you guys in the next podcast, the next video. Bye bye for now.
Bye, bye everyone. Ciao.